The following accounts are true stories, submitted by the people who experienced them. I ask you to please listen with an open mind, remembering that it's taken a lot of courage for these people to share their stories. All my life, I have had these things, these shadows, following me. I'd see them everywhere I go. At school, on the road, at home, even in my dream. I never really paid much attention to them, because they never seemed to want to harm me, and I thought maybe I was just hallucinating, and that they weren't real. But all that changed recently. About 2 weeks ago, I was in my living room, watching TV, when I suddenly had this eerie feeling of being watched, not by one, but by many people. Then, the TV turned off by itself, and the lights went dim, so dim it was almost completely dark. Then, about 6 shadow people walked in through the wall behind the TV, and were slowly closing in on me. I couldn't see their faces. They were just complete blackness. I tried to get up and run out of there, but I couldn't move. I live alone in my apartment, but I've got neighbors, so I tried to scream, hoping someone would hear and try and help me. But no matter how hard I tried to scream, I couldn't. I started saying a prayer in my mind, begging God to help me. As soon as I did, they were gone. In the twinkling of an eye, they were gone. The TV turned back on, and the lights that were dim regained their brightness. But this was not the most disturbing experience. A few days ago, I went on a picnic date with a girl I had just recently met. It was getting dark, so we were parking up, about to leave, when I suddenly had that same strong eerie feeling of being watched. As I looked up, I saw them, the shadow people, about 8 of them, walking out of the woods and closing in on us. I looked at the girl I was with, whose name I won't mention here, but she seemed not to notice anything amiss, and was busy packing things up and talking to me. I remembered my previous experience at my apartment, and how the prayer I said within me had saved me, so I decided to say another prayer, hoping it'll scare them off. But while I was still thinking this, I saw the girl I was with fall to the ground. And before I could even have time to think what might have happened to her, I passed out. I later woke up in a hospital, and found out that some people at the park had helped me and the girl I was with to the hospital, after we both passed out. We were both discharged a few hours later, after doctors found nothing apparently wrong with any of us. This is really terrifying for me, because now it seems even people close to me can be affected by these shadow people. I have called them shadow people throughout my account, but I didn't even know what they were called, until I did some research online after leaving the hospital. From the research I did, it seems these shadow people are people who are stuck between this life and the next. But if that's true, what do they want with me? And why have I been seeing them my whole life? And why didn't they try and harm me before? And why are they harming me now? I have no answers to these questions, but I think I need to see a priest. My family had just bought a house in Rockhampton, Queensland, where my maternal grandparents lived. The house seemed okay at first, but soon after, I started hearing weird noises. And it wasn't just me. The rest of my family had mentioned they heard things as well, except for my dad, who said he didn't hear anything, and that we were just being paranoid. One day, I had returned from school and was in my bedroom with a friend, when suddenly I felt strangled. I was choking. My friend was confused, not knowing what was happening. He screamed for my mom, who came rushing into the room. There were handprints around my neck, and this really freaked out my family. Even my dad got worried, and we decided not to spend the night at the house. Instead, we spent the night at my grandparents' house. That night, even at my grandparents' house, we still heard the footsteps and weird noises. My grandparents heard them too, and were restless all night long. We returned to our house the following morning. A few days pass, and we keep hearing the noises, but nothing major. Until one night, we heard my little sister screaming from her room. We all rushed to her room, and found her almost unconscious, with handprints around her neck. The same invisible hands that tried to choke me had also tried to choke her. This was too much for my parents to bear, and it was clear that the house was haunted, so my dad decided we were going to move out of the house. We started renting another house a few days later, and my dad put our house on sale. But only a few days after moving into the new house, my mom got attacked while taking her afternoon nap. She had fallen asleep on the living room couch. My sister was in the house with her, while I was outside riding my bike. Our dad wasn't home. My sister came rushing outside, crying and calling me, that mom was being choked. I dropped my bike and rushed into the house, and a few seconds after I get into the house, it stops. We were all shaken and crying, and those same handprints were on my mom's neck. We call our dad and he rushed home. Now we're all really confused. At first we thought the house we bought was haunted. But now it looks like it is my family that is haunted. Because no matter what house we move into, this scary occurrences still happen, and we don't know what to do about it. This is the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. My family lives in Baltimore, Maryland. And last Thanksgiving, my father decided to invite his close relatives to come celebrate the holiday at our house. He had never done such a thing before, and there are rarely any family meetings, so he was worried that we, the younger generation, will grow up without knowing each other. This was true, because I had lots of uncles, aunts, and cousins that I had never met. Our house is quite big, and could accommodate all those he invited. Most of them arrived on the eve of Thanksgiving. They were all loud and lively, and having them around was so much fun. But there was one, a cousin, who I was meeting for the first time. He was the only quiet one at the entire family gathering. So when my dad said I was going to share my room with him, I thought it was the perfect opportunity for us to get acquainted. The family stayed up late that night, eventually going to bed after midnight. In my room, I had the chance to really talk more with my quiet cousin. We talked for a while before going to bed, and he seemed really nice. The next day was Thanksgiving, and we had a great celebration. My quiet cousin and his mom were going to leave the following day, so we got to spend another night together. This night, though, is a night I will never forget in my life. We had gone to sleep, and I was having this weird dream that I can't quite remember. All I know is that it was a really disturbing dream, a nightmare. And it was so disturbing that I awoke. Then I heard banging noises from behind me. I sat up and looked around, and saw my cousin fighting. But with no one. I saw him slammed and pinned against the wall, high up that his feet could not touch the floor. My cousin looked at me, and seemed surprised that I was awake. Then whatever it is he was fighting pulled him away from the wall, lifted him high up, suspended him in the air for a few seconds, then slammed him to the floor. I was completely horrified. I screamed and rushed out of the room and called for help. My whole family came rushing in. But by the time they got there, all was calm. The only sign that my cousin had been violently attacked was that he looked visibly tired, and was panting, like someone who had been running. When asked what happened, he said nothing, that all was fine. I was shocked. I explained everything to my family, and they believed me, seeing how terrified I was, and how exhausted my quiet cousin looked. But he kept denying it, saying I must have had a nightmare. My family didn't believe him, and kept pressuring him, until he eventually told them the truth. He was crying the entire time, saying he had been having these spiritual attacks since he was about 4 years old, but didn't tell anyone because he thought they would think he was crazy, or just making it up. He said he was surprised that I woke up while he was under attack, because he has slept with friends and even his girlfriend, but no matter how violent or how long the attacks are, no one ever hears. We did a family prayer there for him, and the next day he left with his mom. My dad later checked up on them. Apparently, an exorcism was conducted on him. We have plans to gather as a family at my uncle's house in Mississippi this year for Thanksgiving, and I hope my quiet cousin will be there, so that I can ask him about the exorcism and update you about it. A few years ago, my family went on a vacation to Paris, France. It was an unforgettable trip, for 2 main reasons. First of all, because the city is breathtakingly beautiful, and we had a wonderful time there. The second reason I'd never forget that trip is because of what happened afterwards, as a result of the trip. We had been visiting famous sites in the city, like the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, Disneyland Paris, and we also decided to visit the catacombs of Paris. In the catacomb, human skulls and bones line the walls of the centuries-old tunnel, with around 6 million corpses buried inside. We had heard a few urban legends and ghost stories about the place, but nobody in my family believed in ghosts, so we didn't take them seriously. We visited the catacomb and all went well. A few days later, we returned home to Minneapolis, Minnesota. A few days after we returned though, I started seeing people. Faceless people. Some were adults, others were children. I usually just caught glimpses of them, disappearing into a corner. I saw them mostly at nights, but sometimes during the day. At first I tried to ignore it, but it became more and more frequent. Around the same time I had fallen ill. I told my family about it, and to my surprise they told me they had been hearing strange voices as well, and sometimes they'd hear children laughing. My sickness grew worse, so I was taken to the hospital. But they couldn't diagnose anything wrong with me. The doctor prescribed some drugs for the fever and sent us home. As the days went by, my sickness got worse, and I kept seeing these mysterious people. My dad, mom, and sister also kept hearing the strange voices, but they were never able to make out what they were saying, and they never got sick. We began to suspect that it may have had something to do with the catacomb of Paris, but we still found it hard to believe, because like I mentioned earlier, my family didn't really believe in ghosts or things like that. Besides, the thought that ghosts would follow me, all the way from Paris to the USA, that seemed far-fetched to us. And yet I was getting sicker and sicker. And despite going to different hospitals and having all kinds of tests done, no virus or disease was ever found in me. I was medically healthy, but dying of sickness. And no matter what medication I took, it just kept getting worse. Even the doctors were confused. One of the doctors in one of the hospitals we went to actually suggested we seek spiritual help, but again, my family didn't really believe such things. My parents were getting desperate, and at this point I was so sick that I could barely move. Then one night, at around 1 a.m., I woke up and saw a man standing in my room, with a gentle smile on his face. My sister was fast asleep beside me. The man touched my hand gently, and told me to go back to sleep, and that all will be well by morning. As soon as he said this, I drifted off into sleep, and when I woke up in the morning, I was feeling perfectly fine. My family was shocked, so shocked my mom started crying. And before I could tell them about the man I saw that night, my sister joyously said something that stunned me. She said she had a dream that night of a young man talking to me, telling me I will be fine. Apparently, while the man was in the room with me, my sister was dreaming about it. My family was all the more surprised when I told them about my experience with the man. And since then, I no longer see those faceless people, and neither does my family hear the weird voices anymore. Our family doctor was also shocked at my inexplicable, immediate, complete recovery. We still don't know who the man that came to me was. But those events made myself, and my family, to reevaluate our beliefs about ghosts and the paranormal. Thank you for watching. And thank you to all those who so courageously shared their stories with us today. If you enjoyed the video, then please like, share and subscribe to the channel. And if you want more of our content, then please watch the video suggested on the screen now. Until next time.